Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me, as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest of F1 journalists to have ever goated, the legend that is Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing well, Cam. Actually, I have to smile when you talk about the goat there because after the British Open, after the Open, and after the Belgian Grand Prix, I really felt I needed to relax. So as one does, I just plucked a copy of one of the Tintin books out of my bookshelf, and it happened to be the Voyage to the Moon, in which Professor Calculus is accused of acting the goat. And I suddenly realized what you mean by all this. And yeah, I have been acting the goat most of my life, actually.
Absolutely not,
Yeah.
Peter. Far too humble as it. By goat, of course, I mean the greatest of all time.
Ah, well, you
Uh,
didn't have to say that. That's very
I mean,
silly.
Peter, one must put some respect on your name, as is customary,
Well, did
Mr.
you see,
Windsor.
just on that, did you see,
Go.
you wouldn't have seen it, but right at the end of my videos, I'm sure most people switch off halfway through, but on the video I did last night, right at the end, after I'd stopped rabbiting on, I put a little picture in of the memorial to Paul Frere, a journalist colleague, and talking about goat. To me, he was the goat because this was a motoring journalist, a Belgian motoring journalist, which is why he's remembered there at Spa, who happened to be good enough to finish top three in Formula One Grand Prix. Fabulous driver, lovely guy, bit of a mentor to me when I first came over, very gentle and not spoken about very much at all. So I put that in right at the end of the video. Paul Frere, great Belgian journalist, racing driver. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Good man. Goat journo and human being, Peter Windsor.
Oh.
Let it be known. Good sir. As is customary, Mr. Windsor,
Mm.
what do you make, in your estimation, what was the biggest story to come out of the Belgian Grand Prix this weekend?
That the 2026 F1 regulations don't work on circuits like Spa, and whose fault is that? Spa's been around a lot longer than the current Formula. So it's a shame. It's a great shame that there was so much going on that I couldn't understand. I mean, I'm not saying shame for myself, but I was chatting to a lot of people during the race and afterwards, and nobody could really make head or tail of what was going on at all. And I think it's very sad when at the end of the race, the correct way of describing the winner is no longer brilliant overtakes or incredible concentration or wonderful time management. It's incredible power displacement management and deployment control and all this battery management. I mean, do we really want that? I don't. And I know we're going to Hungary and all the talk will die down because there it'll be nothing like as obvious. But so long as so long as it is that, so long as that is the prime part of Formula One, it grates. It really does grate. So
It
that's
was
what
a
I
bit.
remember Spa for, I think, more than anything else. Obviously there are lots of side issues.
Yeah, no, it felt a little bit problematic, and I mean, the past couple of races we've had some good ones. Right, Austria, it didn't feel like the the rules and regs were at the forefront, and now all of a sudden we get Spa, and it's like you see that the F1 regs in 2026 really do have no close. That it is the battery powered. There is nothing traction limited around Spa, is there?
No, and consistently throughout the weekend, Max Verstappen was quite slow through the right-hand part of Eau Rouge. I mean, that is just, it's like saying, oh, the sun's shining beautifully tonight. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But he's doing that because that's the only way he can harvest the power for correct deployment on the straight or the rest of the lap. And they're thinking, well, that's the least possible downside area, I guess. But it breaks my heart, and I think it breaks a lot of people's heart. A, to see that, and B, to hear during the race they're saying to Max, see if you can go in a bit slower into a corner and focus on the exit. I mean, that's absolutely contrary to the way Max Verstappen has ever driven a racing car at any point in his career. And he did it, and they said, oh, yeah, it's much better now. It's just terrible. They all have to be reduced to the lowest common denominator, and they're all backing off on the straights. No wonder it's quite close, because when you take away top speed as one of the elements of Formula One, controllable elements to do with aero or power, and you just neutralize that completely. No wonder the lap times on a circuit like Spa are relatively close. And it's no good just saying, oh, wow, they're all separated by half a second or whatever. Isn't it amazing? Because that's just, it's just facile, isn't it, really?
Is this the worst that you've seen it, Peter?
Yeah, oh yeah, this year. Well, obviously Melbourne was not good, but when we give them a pass a little bit there because it was the first race. But this to me was the worst. And imagine how bad it would have been had they not made the changes, from Miami onwards. And so, I was chatting to somebody yesterday. They said, "Oh, Max has been given a hard time because he's considered to be a whinger now because he's the only driver that's out there really talking about the regulations and how crazy they are." Well, not more fool. It's not the right word, but everyone else should be ashamed of themselves in that case because everybody knows. They must know, or maybe they don't. Maybe the stakeholders in the bagel shop on Madison Avenue don't know or care, and they're delighted that Audi have got more points again. And in general, Formula One continues to rise, I guess, as a business. But there is a point where you really have to start thinking about the essence of the sport and what it's all about. And I guess the answer for the two stakeholders sitting in their bagel shop will be, we'll get rid of Spa. You know, and it's an easy thing to do because I'm sure Spa's not a particularly profitable race for Formula One because it's run by people with, motor racing in their hearts and souls rather than people who just want to go out there and make money.
Well, they kind of have done already, haven't they, Peter? For
Yeah.
next year, I want to say Spa it's last time. And
Yeah, I mean, we heard that a lot.
Alternate.
I agree, but having said that, money always talks. And even though they say these things, sometimes a circuit then magically comes back onto the calendar. And until it actually happens, you always have to assume there's going to be some sort of leeway. The other thing, Cameron, that will stick in my mind is that trophy. What was that all about? I mean, it seems to me the drivers didn't know whether to hold it horizontally or vertically. And I was looking at it this morning. It's supposed to be some rendition of a Moet Chandon Jeroboam bottle. I mean, how ridiculous is that it's become so commercial? I mean, it's bad enough that Moet Chandon is not the old Moet, and it's now this sort of bling one, and instead of the old nice Marcus Westbury one that we knew and loved. And I remember getting those lovely. Well, I was the filter between Jackie Stewart, who was representing Moet, and the drivers, and they'd get these nice letters saying, please do this, do that, and it was all done very tastefully. And now I'd have a trophy based on a Moet bottle. And on that basis, I'm come prepared because look at that. That's the trophy that I was lucky enough to receive with 10 other team members, given to us by the Belgian Grand Prix organisers after Nigel won the '86 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. And which is the better trophy? Obviously, these are miniatures. But, it was nicely done with the date of the race and everything engraved on it and all that stuff. And that to me is a nice trophy. It says quite a lot, doesn't it? There's Spa. There's a nice bit of local mined marble, I think it is, And what's this current thing all about? It's just so commercial. They've completely, that more than anything else to me, sums up the 26 World Championship, that trophy.
Yeah, the game's gone, Peter. I want to ask you this though, Peter, about solving it, because people always tell me that I'm part of the problem and not part of the solution. Mohammed bin Sulayem says that he wants to bring back V8s in 2031 when we go into the brand new rule and reg set. But the issue with V8s is that they are at the start of the race heavier than this current iteration of cars. What is the solve in your humble opinion, Peter? V8s, V10s, hybridization, but less than we are now. What is the solve?
Well, what do they mean by heavier? You mean with the fuel load, obviously, is what they mean.
Yeah.
But if you take a full load of fuel for a V8 powered Formula One car, and then you weigh a fully batteried 50/50 Formula One car, you're telling me that it's a lot heavier than that?
That's
hard to believe.
Yeah, that's the chat. Needs much more fuel. Hence why they're proposing to bring back refueling, because MBS wants lighter cars.
Well, there's a couple of elements here. I think in general, if Formula One wants to drop electrics and go towards reusable fuel, if that's the right phraseology, I think that's a very, very good thing. And that's something on which the public can focus, the Formula One can focus, all the technology can be out there, more or less. Obviously, the actual chemical mixtures would remain confidential, but it's something that we could all talk about and something that makes sense to the general public. If we're using fuel that is, all these things great for the environment, and that's something I would definitely go for. Lighter cars, is that? I mean, Smaller cars, definitely. Lighter cars, definitely. But I still find that hard to believe. I still find it hard to believe that a car purpose built around a V8 on full tanks would be heavier than the current electric 50/50 car with the battery that we have. I find that really hard to believe. I'd love to see proof of that. And if
Yeah.
so, okay, maybe for 5 laps, but after that, not. And I would always counsel against bringing back refueling, because certainly just to make the cars lighter, I don't think it makes any sense. Because first of all, you have the problem of potential fire, and that's the last thing Formula One needs ever. And secondly, you have the big question of how you then do the refueling and who would supply the rigs and how that would work and what fuel flow rates you have. And imagine the can of worms that would be opened up if you started to go down that road again. It was bad enough before, and it would be just as bad again if you tried to have a central supplier of all the rigs and try to have absolute equality right down the pit lane. To me, that's just playing with fire. It's another thing. We don't need to do that, so let's not do it. It's a bit like the active arrow. We don't need it on the cars, so get rid of it. We don't want movable aerodynamic parts on a Formula One car. And I got to say, I still think the Ferrari system should not be allowed, because it's another additional moving part, and they're all dangerous.
The old Macarena wing. Go on then. As
But
far as
but
the
I, but
race,
I will get behind the president 100% when it comes
yeah.
to going back to V8s or V10s or anything that moves us back towards normally aspirated ICE engines as the basis of a Formula One car. No, it doesn't have
Any,
to be normally aspirated. That's wrong. But certainly the internal combustion engine should be a much more important part of it all.
you would prefer normally naturally aspirated, though, right, Peter?
Well, I mean, yes, only because I'm lucky enough to have lived in the days of V12s, V10s, V8s, and I know what they sound like and I know what they look like. And so why do you want to dilute that with turbos? But having said that, the turbo these days, 3-cylinder turbo is an incredibly efficient production engine on the road, isn't it? So if we can get away from electrics, I'm not going to create too much fuss of where they go, because I just think this whole electric thing is it's so sad, isn't it? Because, and I keep using that word sad because there is no other word to describe it, adjective to describe it, and that is that Formula One should have adopted the whole electric car philosophy instead of allowing it to go out to Formula E as a separate tender. And it should have been part of the Formula One race card ever since. Formula One should have continued on its own path of development, maybe doing a lot more on fuels, but it should still be basically V8s or V10s. But we should have a support race every Grand Prix, or maybe the ones, European ones, whatever, for electric racing cars. Formula E would never then have existed. And the Formula One teams would have endorsed those teams, and the Grand Prix drivers would have done the odd race in those electric cars whenever Formula One needed to. It was a tool they could have pushed and pulled whenever they wanted. If they wanted to get more money from Silicon Valley, they could have done it. And they didn't do that. I still find that incomprehensible. Well, it's not incomprehensible. I know why they didn't do it, because of the fight between Bernie and John Todd. And John Todd went off and did Formula E, and that was the end. And the minute that happened, Formula One was always in trouble, because the electric thing was just growing and growing and growing. Yeah. And we're still in that trouble now.
Spa-Franco shot,
yeah.
Peter. I want to double click on George Russell and his circumstance. He's been talking about this for the last couple of races, saying that he needs to change his driving style with a view to optimize for battery deployment. Do you feel like this is fair? Seeing George Russell early on in the race lose a lot of power, battery deployment, and lose a lot of places. Ultimately, he ends up there right next to Lewis Hamilton and then DNF shortly thereafter. Does this feel fair as far as George Russell's campaign for a Drivers' Championship in 2.6?
Fair on himself, you mean?
Yeah, something doesn't. For me, it doesn't feel. It doesn't feel fair that George would have a nightmare of a race just because of battery deployment.
Well, there are two. I mean, he said this business about, I'm now working on my driving style before the race. So I'm not sure he said after the race that was all due to me. In fact, he didn't, did he? He said it was due to some boost error. But I find that, this is where I talk about, I find it all so incomprehensible, because, yeah, George was doing just before the braking area into Les Combes, right? And maybe his toe hasn't been quite as good, but he's getting passed by a lot of cars. But on the first lap out of Eau Rouge there, yep, there's a difference between the types of toes, but they're all getting a toe. So George is doing 3:16 at that point, just before the braking area. Charles Leclerc 3:22. That's how Charles passed him. And not the only, Oscar Piastri's doing 3:23. Kimi Antonelli, however, who gets a toe from a slow-moving Max Verstappen, 3:07, actually slower than George Russell. So if George had a specific mechanical boost issue, what happened? I mean, he's actually going quicker than Kimi Antonelli, who's about to, win the Belgian Grand Prix. I just don't get it. I don't think George gets it any more than anybody else does, because nothing makes sense, really. I mean, Lewis was very quick as well. If you look at Lewis, 3:29, quicker than Charles Leclerc. And George Russell, 3:16. We've never had that sort of difference on the straight. And I did say last year, speed differential on the straight is the thing that worries me most about these regulations. And it's kind of got pushed to one side amongst all the other issues of how they get the thing to work and deploy around the lap and how you drive the car efficiently and quickly. But speed differential remains a major issue, both in terms of danger and in terms of, this is what happened obviously in Spa, of then funneling everybody when they get to the braking area 3 abreast into a corner like Les Combes. And it's no wonder that there was a shunt there. I don't blame Lewis. I don't blame George. I blame the regulations. And I don't think George should blame himself at all. I'm sure he's not. But I don't think Lewis should either. I don't think Lewis was in any way culpable there. And it's all due to the speed differential, the absurd, crazy, unexplainable speed differentials on the straight. And we shouldn't have to be talking about, oh, well, his toe was 3 meters or 3 car lengths, his toe was 4 car lengths. And are the drivers thinking about that rubbish when they're driving down the straight? No. I was going to say at over 300 kilometers an hour, because it doesn't apply to Max Verstappen. So that's one thing. The other thing, in general, I think the pennies dropped much too late for George. I mean, he should have been saying, I need to look at my driving style midway through last year, when it was very clear that Kimi on slow corners was shortening the corner and had much better use of tires through slower sections of road, and if he could project that to medium and high speed corners and high speed change or medium speed change of direction, George was going to be in trouble. That was the moment for George privately probably to have said to himself, I need to dig deep here and have a look and see what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. And it took him actually into Miami this year to really start thinking what is going on. And then he said, oh, well, no, it can't be me. It must be just that I don't like Miami. When we get to Canada, everything will be fine. And then he won Austria, won in inverted commas. And now finally, what is it? After 10 races of 2026, it's 9, I guess, because it was before this race weekend. He's finally saying to himself, oh, maybe I need to think about my driving style. The problem now, of course, is that I suspect the way he will do that is to study telemetry even more and get his engineers to study Kimi's telemetry and try to translate it into what he does in a racing car, none of which will work, because none of the differences are going to be visible on telemetry anyway. They're going to see differences where Kimi puts the power on, where he brakes, where he uses the steering, but none of that can be related to the actual dynamic weight at a millisecond that Kimi's actually managing at that moment. And every car on every corner is slightly differently positioned every lap of the race. So you can't do it on telemetry. And I think George now, the penny has dropped, but I don't think he has any clue how to fix the problem. And he certainly can't fix it on a simulator, that's for sure. Yeah. And I guess when the Spa thing, just to finish the whole paragraph, I guess when the Spa thing happened, lap 1, he's out of the race, that kind of now will make him think, well, this is not really about me, is it? It's all about this stuff, the power, the deployment, the boost, this and that. This is crazy. Formula One's crazy. I'm going to carry on, keep my head down and go racing. And he'll probably be okay I say he'll probably be okay in Hungary. I can't imagine he will be okay in Hungary, to be honest, because I think Kimi will be very good there as well. I mean, what corner will George be better on around Hungary than Kimi Antonelli? No. I can see George using the tyres a bit more through the last corner. George will probably brake a bit later into turn 1. You get away with it because it's quite a wide bit of road there. But where it matters, all the turn in and traction areas, Kimi's going to be just brilliant around. He's going to be worth watching on his own. You know, if you take all the other cars off the grid and just go, and the crowd can just go and watch Kimi Antonelli driving a lap in a car as good as a Mercedes, worth going to see that, in my opinion.
Yeah. No.
Other drivers too, but nobody's going to be in a car as good as a Merc. And then finally, from George's point of view, I guess the other point is, if he had backed off completely and let everybody go that was remotely going to cause him trouble into Les Combes, given the whole funneling effect there of him being so slow on the straight, then, and say he'd come around lap 1 in 12th place or something, he still would have been second in that race because he's in a very good race car. So that's another thing that, needs to be thought of. Having said that, I don't know, maybe that whole boost issue would have continued. But what boost issue? He was actually quicker than Kimi. I don't get that.
It's weird, Peter. There's a couple of things going on that I can't wrap my noddy head around it. You saw in free practice that he was like 1.3 seconds adrift of Kimi. It's like, well, that you can't attribute. I don't think we can attribute all of that down to just driving style.
But you know what? You know what he said about that? He said we overestimated the
grip on the track
grip
in the sim, right? Yeah.
Well, don't use the sim as much then. Think about it. Spa, it does rain. The track goes green. These things happen. Go there with an open mind. It's the same with Oscar. As I said last year, and I've been saying this, he's completely lost because of the telemetry they keep using and the sims they keep doing. And that's the great pitfall. You think Kimi spends a massive amount of time looking at George's telemetry?
No,
exactly.
No.
He's a young kid getting out there and he's sniffing the air and getting in the race car and feeling the surface of the road and driving it. That's what he needs. That's what George needs to learn from Kimi. Go back to square one and just do that. But of course, he does have his spikier inputs and he does have his longer corners. So, if he wants to work on those, he's got to do that in a very methodical way in a road car, lap after lap after lap, and get into the Gary Player philosophy of, the more bunker shots I hit, the luckier I'll get. And that's what George needs to do. Lots of repetitions, lots of muscle memory repetitions. And I don't think that's never going to happen in a sim. Never.
I don't know. I can't help but feel a degree of empathy to George.
I do too.
Car.
I felt very sorry for him yesterday. Very sorry for him because that was nothing to do with him. He was a complete passenger. But I don't get this business of this boost issue. Well, if it's a boost issue, imagine the boost problem that Kimi Antonelli had, and he won the race.
Yeah,
because Kimi was slower. What can I keep saying it. They never seem to explain anomalies like that.
But he didn't have it critically in qualifying, did he, Kimi? He was like between.
Yeah, but did George have it in qualifying?
Oh yeah, Peter.
But we don't know that, Cameron. We don't know if the reason that he was slow through sector 3 and up the hill was because he had used more power than Kimi in sectors 1 and 2. We don't know that. How do we know that? Yeah. We don't know whether Max, when he got the tow from Hadjar, whether that enabled him then to use more power in sector 2 because he knew he was going to get the tow and therefore he could afford to do it, or whether maybe they ran a little bit lower on ride heights and gave him, and he could back away a little bit because he knew he was going to get the tow in sector 3. We don't know any of that stuff. We just have to make assumptions. I think in the case of Hadjar, I think Max did have a setup that worked through sector 2, and therefore he could afford to compromise a bit through 1 and 3. And it was a staggering drive yesterday that he managed to finish third, and probably would have been second without the VSC thing for Charles. But we just don't know. I mean, every time, if you look at the top speeds of George versus Kimi, well, not the top speeds, but if you look at, for example, the entry speeds into Pouin, he's much quicker than Kimi. So if he's got way down on boost, how's that happening? And anyway, I repeat my point. If it was the same boost problem as qualifying, how come he was quicker on the straight than Kimi on lap 1?
Huh. Interesting. I have no idea. It looks weird though, Peter, seeing him just like for a moment there, he might have been quicker than Kimi, but towards the end of that straight, it looked like his W17 was all out.
Those numbers I just gave you are just before they touch the brakes, millisecond before they touch the brakes. George Russell 316, Kimi Antonelli 307.
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, Kimi was, the tow he got from a very slow Max might have slowed him down, but then again, George was in traffic as well and didn't get a great tow. but it doesn't matter. You know, it's 7 kilometers an hour quicker than Kimi.
Something's happening, Peter, and I don't like it when you get Toto and Shoveling saying, "Oh yeah, something's going on." It might be a bit of driving style, but there is something broader with that Mercedes PU that all of the customers suffered from, that George is suffering from more than most. It's like, well, what do we do? Like, this is the F1 World Championship. I want to see the best drivers in the best cars, not quite in equal machinery, but at least, you know, I don't want George or anyone else to suffer in the championship by dint of battery deployment.
Yeah, but
What?
let me suggest something to you then. Could it be that Mercedes are not doing a particularly good job of some specific cool thing that other teams have discovered on the formation lap to do with battery? Because look at this. You got the two. Let's assume George has got a boost problem on that opening lap. He's doing 3:16. Kimi's doing 3:07. So that means both Mercedes have got a boost problem, if that's the right phraseology, and it is the one they used. Compared with that, you've got the Ferraris at the same point doing 3:22 and 3:29. Now, rather than saying, poor George, look at the boost problem, why isn't everybody saying, how did Ferrari go so quickly compared with Mercedes on the first long straight of a lap? Is that just the way they're harvesting the power out of La Source, or are they doing something trick on the formation lap that Mercedes don't know about? Now, you could say, well, it could be that. But then again, you got Oscar Piastri 3:23. So maybe McLaren are doing a better job on the formation lap than the factory Mercedes team. It could be that. It could be Mercedes are just ridiculously slow on opening laps of a race. We won't be able to tell till we get to Monza probably, because there won't be another proper circuit on which to evaluate this. But before everybody jumps on the whole George thing, we should consider that. Why were Ferrari so quick relative to both Mercedes and Oscar for that matter? Everybody else, there's so much traffic and there's so much towing going on. You had some ridiculous speeds. You had 340 odd Pierre Gasly and all that stuff. But let's not talk about that, because that's not the relevant point. The relevant point is at the front of the race. And the winner of the Belgian Grand Prix is doing 3:07 at the end of Kimmel Straight, just before the braking area. And he's just pulled out of a tow.
Unbelievable.
Well, it is unbelievable and it's unexplainable. And more than anything, Mercedes need to think, I believe, why are Ferrari and McLaren so much quicker on this opening straight? That's what they need to look at.
Peter, let me ask you about Kimi Antonelli. I've been a Kimi Antonelli naysay, hesitant to jump on the bandwagon. Everybody's saying that he's definitely the next one. He's blitzkrieg quick and minimizes for Deg. He's bending the space-time continuum per se, doing impossible things in that car. How did you rate his drive at Spa? And do you think he's now shooting for the championship?
I think every race we see another layer of brilliance from Antonelli. And it's sort of an exponential growth since the beginning of last year. And I think at Spa we saw two things: perfect deployment management, power management, which is, on a circuit where it's really important. You can get away with it on slower tracks, but around Spa, you had to be absolutely spot on in the way you thought about the wind direction, when you were going to deploy, when you were going to harvest, or the way you used the power, the way you came onto the power, all those really boring things that the 26 regs ask of a driver, and he executed that perfectly. And then beyond that, he won the race at the slowest possible speed. And I don't think he's ever done that before. I think he's always sort of had a bit of a dance towards the end, maybe he's tried to set fastest lap or pulled away a little bit more, done something. But this was, having obviously got the pass at Spa that he should have got at Silverstone against Charles, and having pulled that off in a perfect way, passed him in the least possible downside way, because he never want to be in an out-breaking deal with Charles Leclerc. He's the most difficult, dangerous guy to pass on a racetrack, in my opinion. The last thing you want is to be side by side with Charles going into Les Combes. No, he did everything else. He built up the deployment. He got the overtake, the whole thing, just as easily on the straight. Charles had no option but to let him go. But then he just stayed. He just ran as slowly as he possibly could without letting Charles get too near him, just to make sure that he finished the race. And that was another layer, as I say, of sort of Jack Brabham-like win at the slowest possible speed talent, and that's what we saw. And this all mounts up, it all builds up, and one day he'll be under unbelievable pressure, whether it be for a championship, whether it be for something else, and all these layers that he's built up will be there ready just to, you know, do the job for him mentally. And so, yeah, it's wonderful to watch it, and he's beautifully managed by the team, and he's not letting it get ahead of himself at all. He's just enjoying every minute, and that's the right way to do it. Just enjoy every lap, every race, and not even think about the championship.
I was surprised yesterday, Peter. I thought for a while there that Charles Leclerc was going to mount some sort of defense, that it might be a bit tricky, but in the end, with the benefit of hindsight, from Antonelli's perspective, it felt almost inevitable. Peter, I'm reminded of Max Verstappen when he had himself a decent car, right? Like it it was almost routine the way that he went away and won that race. He's no longer he's now chewing his food before he swallows it. Whereas a couple of races ago, he was a bit messy, a bit
Yeah.
grabby for some of the overtakes. The way that he dispatched with Charles was championship like, right?
Oh yeah, that exactly what I said, and everybody has to fear that. You know, I'm sure when Max was looking in his eyes after the race, he was thinking, you know, you did the job again, and he's that good. You know, he's really good. And as I say, you don't really want to have Charles Leclerc to be the guy you got to pass to win a Grand Prix. And particularly after Silverstone when it didn't happen for him, and it would have, I think. But you know, he just did it perfectly. And what impressed me most were the laps after he passed Charles, as I say, when he didn't just try to set fastest lap and pull away. He just sat there, annoying Charles, just too far away for Charles to do anything, but just enough to make sure he stayed away from all the curbs and did everything correctly and brought the car home nicely, and which is what he did. Not an easy thing for any driver to do, let alone a guy that's just lost a race the way he lost Silverstone. And and yet he did it at that age with that experience, you know, just fabulous.
He's the guy, isn't he, Peter? I wanted to ask, this is a debate that I've been having with my community. If we're playing hypothetical games for a second, imagine that Max does go to Mercedes next year, 2027, between Kimi Antonelli at the age of 20 years old and Max Verstappen. Let's imagine that Mercedes do have the fastest car next year. Who have you got, Peter? Do you think Max can beat Kimi Antonelli at 20 years old in equal machinery?
Depends what you mean by beat. Do you mean beat him over a 23 race
Yeah,
championship and be world champion?
yeah.
Yes, I do think Max can do that. I think Kimi could do it as well. It'll come down to some very small differences, but certainly race to race, Kimi's quite capable of, in a Mercedes, quite capable of beating Max in a Mercedes if Max doesn't get it quite right and Kimi does. And it'll be very close between those two. If they, I doubt there'll be a lot of fur flying because I think there's quite a lot of mutual respect, and Max will be joining this new team and not wanting to, you know, drive into his new teammate too often. Not that he does that anyway, but he'll be avoiding that, I think. So that'll be that'll be a nice thing to see, probably, or not, depending on what you want from your Formula One. If you want your two guys crashing into one another, then you'd probably be disappointed. But I think in terms of outright pace, I think Max will have it slightly. Obviously, be a lot of adjustments for him, working with new people, new systems, getting used to everything from the sim to the power unit to everything else. But I think over one lap, Max could have him, will have him, generally speaking, if he's got the car how he wants it. But Kimi's going to be more able to get the car how he wants it, I think, for most of that first year. And therefore, that's why I think it'll be very, very close. And Kimi will get better. I mean, Kimi's bright enough to be able to learn from Max as well, and not to do a sort of Alonso versus Hamilton and dial himself out of it. He will learn from everything that Max does, and that will be to his benefit as well. That's why I think it'll be very, very close. Very close. You're making notes there.
Indeed, Peter. I just muted because it sounds like Beirut outside of here because my bloody they're picking up the garbage. Peter, I wanted to pick your brain on
Mm.
Kimi Antonelli. What he does. So there's been a lot written about his driving style that he optimizes for the racing line. You've spoken on your channel about his ability to V line low speed corners How does he go so fast and take this blitzkrieg pace through high minimum speed corners and minimize for the rate at which his tires deg, Peter? I don't understand.
Well, I think you can look at the net results of Kimi's driving and say he's good on tire management. He's pretty good in terms of looking after the car and bringing it home. He's very good at reading the moment of the day, the wind directions, chiming in with Bono on that, and he's very good at winning races, and he withstands pressure incredibly well. But if you want to get down to the next layer of what that is all about, of what George Russell is trying to work out the heart of, trying to work that, then you don't have to be too complicated about it. It's just that, as I keep saying, he has this natural gift of his rates of input into the car, generally speaking, are totally in harmony with the dynamic weight of the car at any given moment. And he has that feel, that natural feel that a Max has, that a Lewis has, that a Charles Leclerc has, that a Jim Clark had, that a Michael Schumacher had, that Alberto Ascari had, that Fangio had, that Sterling Moss had. It's a gift, that that feeling for perfect harmony. It's like a great singer or a great violinist or whatever. A great musician has a gift to be absolutely pitch perfect or whatever it is for the specific musical exercise that they are using, whether it be singing, playing an instrument. Everything is perfect, and it is that with Kimi. He's got this perfect harmony with the car in terms of his rates of input, and that manifests itself then, therefore, into feeling the surface of the road incredibly well and being able to shorten the corners. Initially, in Kimi's case, I think because of his age and lack of experience, that was something he could do very naturally on slow corners, and he did straight away the minute he was in a Mercedes. Then, obviously, to do that well on a faster corner and a really quick corner is something different, because Formula One cars are very, very quick. And I said, beginning of last year, to a third of the way through last year, the interesting thing now will be whether Kimi can take that slow corner feel that is so obvious now to the next level through medium and high speed. And he did. He did over the winter. And as soon as he won a race, the confidence just built like that. And he has exactly the same qualities now on high speed, medium speed, and slow speed to do with his wonderful rates of input, coordination, and harmony. That's all there on all those corners. So for him, the big sweet spot, the zone, is just as large now going into Beckett's as it is going into turn 2 in Hungary. That's the point, and he's managed to do that in a wonderfully progressive way, and very good on change of direction as well. Very good on use of curbs. Just absolutely fabulous to watch. And no different from Max, exactly how Max was, no different from Charles, but just great to see that when these talents come along with that amount of natural feel, then it's always brilliant to watch. So you can then extrapolate all these different things. Oh yeah, yes, that makes him really good in strategy, really good on tire management. Of course he's good on tire management, because basically he's got the tires loaded less than George for less time. So let me rephrase that. He's got the loaded tire loaded for less time than George does. His corners are shorter. He makes the straights go on longer, which is what the tires like, obviously. And on top of that, he's very, very smooth in everything he does. There are no spikes when he's going from the straight line to the initial turn in. Everything is just beautifully seamless. Whereas George is always just a slight jink as he's going in into cops, for example. And that's the difference, and that adds up. You said, what were we talking about? We're talking about something you've multiplied. Oh, we were talking about videos, weren't we? You multiply the time one spends writing a description for a video over a 12-month period. It's quite a lot of time. Yeah, maybe it is. But then equally, if you add up the amount of time that if you add up the energies that a slight jolt at 130 miles an hour puts through the loaded left rear and multiply that by Grand Prix distance, that's a lot of energy compared with what Kimi's doing.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it, I'm sure he doesn't think about it that much. He just looks like a guy that gets in and does the job like Max. Like Ryan Fox yesterday in the Open. You know, you can look at all the golf videos. He breaks every rule in every golf video, and there he is winning the Open. And it's great to see. It's great to see natural talent just dominating over all the procedural stuff that YouTube videos always give you.
Yeah.
Peter Windsor's an exception there, of course. No, I'm only joking. I'm sure mines are fairly straitjacketed as well in some ways. Some people would perceive them that way. But for me, it's not that difficult. He just has perfect rates of input. I mean, how is George going to go and get that perfection? He's not, because he's never had it and he's never driven with it. He's always got on top of the car slightly, and then he's relied on his reflexes and his balance and his judgment and his eyesight and his feel and his bravery or whatever it is. Kimi doesn't rely on any of those things, really. The only thing he's feeling is just the energies of the car, and he's just managing it. I was thinking of another analogy today with Dexter, because for whatever reason, my wife likes to have a very low, flat thing for his water, plastic bowl. But it's only about that high. And of course, it's about that wide. And once you've filled it up, it's actually quite difficult to carry it from the kitchen to the patio. And I was thinking, well, that's exactly what Kimi's doing so well. He's managing this very big bowl of water, and he's not spilling a drop, and it's actually staying absolutely horizontal. How does he do that? And I'm thinking, I'd love to see Kimi doing that, or Max for that matter. And for sure, the water stays pretty much stable, I would think, the whole way.
Yeah. I definitely with Kimi and Max. Let me ask you very lastly about Kimi, Peter. I can't remember seeing an F1 driver on an advertisement more frequently than I have done Kimi Antonelli over the race weekend. The Mercedes GLC advert, they keep trotting that out. I'm bored of seeing it now. Is this proof positive that Mercedes think that Kimi is the next one, the marketing behemoth that they'd hoped that George Russell would have been?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, why would you? I mean, if you look, I don't have any commercials on the TV I watch, so I can't comment about that. But I know where you're coming from and what you're saying. And the way I'm exposed to that is if you look at the media hubs of all the teams, it's always quite interesting to see which driver they're favoring in terms of photographs from that weekend. And it's quite difficult to find some George Russell pictures sometimes on the Mercedes thing. But I think that's just, we did Kimi last week, we'll do George this week. It's probably more of that, so it's being unfair to them. And I'd like to say big thanks to all the teams out there who do those great media hubs. Really, really good, really helpful. As a matter of fact, somebody said on a comment on one of my videos, they said, "Oh, Peter, great pictures. Why don't you ever give credits?" And of course, I do give credits, but they're all in the description below the video, which YouTube tells us is the place to put everything. So if you don't read the descriptions, for sure, Cameron writes beautiful descriptions, handwritten, beautifully composed descriptions. No AI involved, certainly not in my case. Then that's where it all is, in the description. So read the descriptions below the videos. Anyway, getting back to the point, what was the point about? Oh, about the ads. Yeah. Well, it's not that George's days are numbered or whatever, but if this is the guy winning the Grand Prix and he's a cool young Italian, why wouldn't you have him doing that?
Yeah,
Is there any reason not to?
No, he's their guy for sure, and
he's one of their two guys. I mean, I'm sure George will be used for other stuff, whatever. They've got a few.
Peter? I don't see Peter.
They've got some other sponsors, haven't they? I don't know what they are, but they've got some other sponsors.
All I see is Kimi, and I get it. He's very marketable.
I mean, George looks quite cool when he wants to do the old. Is it Boss clothing they're with?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not the same though, is it? Kimi's got.
I bet you George can be made to look cooler in Boss clothing than Kimi.
You think so?
Yeah, Kimi would look much better in Italian t-shirt and board shorts, wouldn't he? Isn't that what he would wear away from
Kimi?
Just correct me here if I'm wrong. Is it Boss that are with Mercedes? I don't know.
Boss used to be with Mercedes.
Oh, who are with it? What's their clothing company now then?
Adidas.
Is it? Okay, well, Adidas. It's a little bit different, but I still think George can look good in Adidas or Adidas, as the Europeans call it.
You know what we're speaking to here, Peter? This is the old adage of what does a champion look like? It's a smile and a twinkle in the eye. It's the flowing hair of a Senna, and he looks a little bit like Valentino Rossi as well, doesn't he? There is something about Kimi Antonelli and a certain authenticity and youthful charm. Whatever a champion looks like, if that's a thing.
He's a cross between Ayrton and Stefano Modena, isn't he, to look at? But I was strolling. I don't know what the right word is, but I was going through the media hub looking for if I could find a picture of George looking a little bit spooked. About 25 jumped out at me. I thought, oh, I wonder why they're putting those up there. They're all, he's got big eyes and he's sort of looking down, wondering what's going on around him. Unusual pictures to have on a media hub, but great. I'm glad Mercedes do it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Go on then, Peter.
The only thing that's curious about these media hubs is that whenever there's a shunt like that, why don't they put pictures up of the shunt? Oh, no, might get a secret view of the underside of the car or some rubbish. But yeah, it's all good stuff. It's all racing. Why are they so paranoid about that?
Nothing to celebrate there, though.
Why don't Ferrari show pictures of the chaotic Lewis pit stop on their media hub?
I'm sure their sponsors would love that, right?
Oh, the sponsors are sitting up there, having a glass of wine. Do they really care? They just think it's all good stuff, don't they?
Oh, I don't think they'd like seeing their logos on a crashed car or one that's beached.
Really?
Because of reliability.
Come on.
No,
well, then they shouldn't be in Formula One in that case. If they think their car's never going to get damaged, then they shouldn't be in Formula One.
True. Fair call. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Round third. I want to ask you about Lewis Hamilton. I saw in your video you said that Lewis Hamilton shouldn't have got a penalty.
No.
The conventional wisdom of the zeitgeist is that, I mean, they said that they were going to give him a 10-second, but because it was the first lap, they reduced it to 5 seconds owing to how chaotic lap one can be. I interpreted that incident not dissimilar to Silverstone 2021. And then the rules say something, if you can keep the car under control, then we can absolve you of culpability. Now, owing to the cheeky snap over steer instance, ultimately Lewis ran into George a little bit. So I thought the 5 seconds was fair. You think he shouldn't have got one, a racing incident?
Yeah, they should have penalised the writers of the regulations for coming up with the 26 formula, causing the ridiculous speed differentials on the straight, which led to the bottleneck going into Les Combes. Of course, you put two Formula One cars alongside one another at Les Combes, particularly front runners, there's always going to be a drama. But you make sure that you've got a category of racing, a formula, which allows the drivers to do what they want to do on the straight with slipstreaming. And as they're approaching the corner, they can all basically be grown men and get a feel for how to drive through Les Combes. And if it's Mika Hakkinen against Michael Schumacher and it's towards the end of the race and there's a Ricardo Zonta there, then yeah, okay, let them have a go. Most drivers would know the pitfalls of Les Combes. I mean, obviously George was braking pretty late to make up for the ridiculous speed differential, but again, it's the speed differential that caused that accident, and that's why Lewis should have been completely absolved from that, in my opinion, because there were 3 into 1, and 3 into 1 does not go. But it was not the fault of the drivers. It wasn't the fault of Lewis trying to do anything particularly outrageous, or indeed George. It was all to do with the speed differential drama.
Can I ask you a question, Peter, under the aegis of consistency or a lack thereof? How did Lewis get a 5-second penalty for coming together incidentally? I mean, I don't think there was any malice in there with George on lap 1. How did he get a 5-second for that and Charles not get a penalty for his move on Oscar Piastri?
Inconsistency. There's no other way to describe it. And what can you say if they don't always get it right? That to me, again, I love looking much further than the detail, and that is that this whole regulation of what you should do or not do in a corner is absurd. And they should get rid of it completely and allow the drivers to be drivers. I just don't see the point of it. And it's all got totally out of control. And it's being judged by I'm not going to say they're not professionals, because that's not the right way to describe them. It's being judged by third parties who are not there in the instant, looking at it from camera angles, trying to make a decision based on grey wording in the rule book, which is ridiculous, in the middle of a Grand Prix with 12 other things they've got to adjudicate behind them. So there's a pressure thing as well. And it's completely wrong. You just get on with it and go racing. And if there's something really crazy, the drivers will sort it out. Let the GPDA do their own thing with a driver. That's much more. You think Riccardo Patrese improved after Monza 78? Yes, he did, because the drivers all said, nah, that was wrong. And he was a better driver for it. And that's what needs to happen. The drivers, the GPDA should be in charge of that stuff, not the FIA. And I think this is where Formula One, again, I haven't watched much of the World Cup, but I did watch a bit of the final yesterday. And I can see how everything that's happening in football sort of bleeds into Formula. Oh, they do it, so we better do it. So they have all these penalties and the guys blowing whistles everywhere, and the guys on the sideline seem to have as much power as the referee in the middle, which is crazy. And in my opinion, and they're doing that in Formula One. Oh, I've got to have penalty for this, penalty for that, rule for this, rule for that. And it's all, they're not thinking through the differences between the sports. Formula One is a very different sport from football, and we shouldn't have all these crazy rules trying to define how a racing driver performs under heavy braking into a corner and what road he's going to use. And right now, it tends to favor the driver who's on the outside of a corner, generally speaking. And that's crazy as well, because the guy on the inside owns the corner, and that's always been the case and always will be the case in reality. And if he wants to use all the road, let him do it. And yet they don't do it. Oh, we've got to have two side by side. Looks great on TV. That's where it's completely gone wrong. So I don't give the stewards a hard time for the inconsistency, really, because I think they have an impossible job. All I would say is that I don't know how many drivers out there lured into thinking that because the rules are there, and providing they drive within the rules, it's going to be okay. And they stop then thinking about the difference between trying to pass Charles Leclerc or, say, Lando Norris. Charles always going to give you a hard time. He's always going to shut the gate. He's always going to do something unexpected. Lando Norris isn't. He's very easy to read. But how many drivers these days, younger drivers, start thinking that way in terms of the other drivers on the grid? They don't. They just think, oh, the rule book covers all this. Everybody's got to be the same. And it's wrong, because they're not. Every driver's different. Every driver's a human being. And Charles Leclerc will always be a tough bastard to pass. Always.
Yeah.
It'll never go away, regardless of what the rule book does. So if Oscar doesn't know that by now, and he just wants to finish the race with the car in perfect condition, nobody touching it, then he's never going to learn it. If you see Charles there, as exactly what Kimi Antonelli did, woof, this is Charles Leclerc. I've got to be very careful here. If that was Lewis, he wouldn't have had to have been so circumspect.
Yeah, fair. You've got to.
So I'm not answering your question, but you're talking to a guy who, I just don't believe in all these rules that we have for what is correct and what is incorrect in a corner.
I mean, I just wish if you're going to have them, though, Peter, at least you institute them in a way that's true and fair and consistent.
Exactly, but one does not lead to the other. The reason we can't have the consistency is a reason not to have them. Because it's no good saying, oh, this is the rule. How are we going to enforce it? You say, well, we've got this enforcement system. What are the rules that would work within the system that we have? Let's not make them too draconian, because there's no way this group of stewards and driver representative are going to be able to make decisions down to that fine detail. Let's not do that. But we will come up with a general rule, which is that if you T-bone somebody without braking, you lose your license, stuff like that. Or you brake test somebody on the straight, or you move over on the straight without looking in your mirrors, you'll be banned for life, whatever, or you hit a safety car, you'll be banned for 12 months, all the good stuff that you would easily write into a rule book. But to start getting down into tiny detail of who's where, who's got oversteer, who hasn't, I mean, it's just pathetic. You can't do that. And there's no group in the world that can correctly police that over a full Formula One season with total consistency.
I wish they listened to you, Peter. But
I was just thinking then, the reason people think, oh, Windsor, what does he know about it? Well, the point is that I'm speaking absolutely contrary to the way, say, football is governed with all its rules and regulations. And because I'm saying that, it sounds very odd, because a lot of people like football. I just put my foot into a football match last night, and I was shocked at all the rules and regulations, the number of whistle blows there were. And I just thought, well, that's why Formula One is the way it is. They're copying the football stuff all the time. And it's completely out of control. They need to go the other way. It all needs to be on safety, not who's right or who's wrong. And there's not enough done. Here you go. Here's not enough done about drivers who move over on the straight and cause problems. Given the speed differentials we now have in Formula One, believe me, it's still something that could be a major, major drama in Formula One. There could be a major shunt because of this. And there's not enough. There's far more rules around what you can do going into a corner than there are about speed differentials and how you handle them on a straight.
It's a very good shout.
Bear
Very
in
good
mind
shout.
also that there's no runoff area on a straight either, and you're always going to hit something solid.
As we round third, Peter, let me ask you very quickly about two things. In the first instance, a lot's been made about Max Verstappen, his future. Some are saying that the McLaren negotiations are just a bluster, posturing that ultimately the most likely eventuality is that Max stays at Red Bull for 2027. Are you buying or selling that, Peter?
Well, last time you asked me about it, and if Max went to Mercedes, how could he do that? And I explained the scenario of how I think they would do it. They would replace George with Max, and what they would do with George's contract. But yeah, I do think that that's such a complicated thing for Mercedes to do, that the easiest option is just to continue as they are. And from Max's point of view, going to McLaren, he's got Rob, he's potentially got GP as team principal. 28 onwards, maybe he would go there. But why would he go there next year? Are McLaren really going to be that much better than Red Bull next year? That's the question he would ask himself. Obviously, he wants to be in a race-winning car, and that's unlikely to happen. So the next best option is what? Red Bull or McLaren?
It's close, isn't it? I'm still invested in the.
Well, I don't think it is that close, actually. I think it's Red Bull because he knows the people.
Wow.
Yeah. Because he knows the people there, even though there's a lot of changes. They've done a pretty good job with the ice, very good job with the ice. In theory, they should be able to pick up the slack on the electrical side. And, I suppose every other race, the car shows a reasonable amount of promise and they get it to work. And at the end of the day, if he can finish third at Spa, despite Charles having the benefit of the VSC, and despite the car being pretty terrible throughout the race with poor downshifts, and he can still finish third in it, that's not bad, is it? Imagine what he'll do in a decent car.
If they can get it decent, Peter.
Well, yeah, yeah, you're right. But then McLaren have had a pretty poor. I know they're getting a little bit better now, but I mean, bear in mind also the Red Bull went down the path of the Ferrari DRS thing, and as a result of that failure at Silverstone, they went back to the other wing, which wasn't in the smaller version, and so that was an inherent problem for them. And that was a basic thing, not very quick in a straight line, and he still did the job. Really, he didn't win the race, but he still did the lap, didn't he? And he was still P3. I was amazed that he was able to pull away from Piastri and beat Lewis and Piastri, to be honest. Absolutely amazed that he was able to. And he wasn't that far behind Kimi in a terrible car, really, compared with the Mercedes. The Red Bull was not a good car. No. And he was right there, Just shows how good Max is still, isn't it, really? I know Kimi was way off his own pace, but fabulous drive by Max. For me, as I said yesterday, I think he was driver of the race.
He's not half bad, Max. And I suppose we've got to put some respect on Isaac Hadjar's name as well for a brilliant come from behind drive.
Yeah, just a generally much better driver than Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda, and probably better than Perez. And just he's there. I mean, he's within a couple of tenths with Max when all things are equal, and he did a really good job with that toe. Not just. I mean, superficially, yeah, it was a great job. But I mean, the timing was just perfect. The way he just ducked away as Max came out. They're going pretty quickly at that point. And and how he just timed the run up the hill perfectly. He was just waiting. And then he knew exactly when to go, and you could just feel it. Born racer. Really, really good. Not easy to do that. It's okay in a straight line, but when it's a curve and then you got Blanchimont, the whole thing, it was, I was very impressed with that.
How many times did Alonso and Massa try to do that at Monza and get it wrong? They're not easy, these toes to set up logistically.
But what do you think would have happened if Freddie had said to Lewis, look, that you've got this 10-place grid penalty, Lewis, we want you to really help Charles now on the run up from Stavolo to the chicane. How do you think that would have gone? How do you think it would go if it was Lando and Oscar last year?
I mean, they asked Oscar to do that, didn't they, at Monza?
Did they? I've forgotten.
Lando's made a mistake. Could you? Do you mind giving him a tow through turn 4 so that he can get through to Q2, Oscar?
I think he
Okay.
sort of tried to do it and then, oh, it didn't quite work. Oh, what a shame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would do,
Yeah. I mean,
Peter.
that's the beauty of that team, isn't it? That's another thing that Max probably thinks about when he mulls over whether to leave Red Bull or not. It is a really good driver pairing. He's the perfect number two to Max because, well, wingman to Max. That's a nicer phraseology, probably, because he's super quick, intelligent. Yeah, he's a bit emotional. He's getting better all the time. But Max is the boss, that's how it feels. He doesn't have to say that. He's the boss, isn't he? But you could never, last year, Oscar wouldn't be thinking, oh, Lando's the boss here, would he? Any more than Lando was thinking Oscar was the boss.
No.
Or Lewis thinks that of Charles or vice versa. Or Kimi doesn't think of George as the boss, I'm sure. He thinks of it as a yardstick that he has to beat. And that's why that team works so well, because it's beautifully balanced and it's a great environment for Max, I think, to have that.
But don't you think Max would go across to McLaren and assume that boss role in his
Maybe,
own
but I
mind
don't
at
think
least?
Lando would.
No.
I don't think Lando would be happy to think of George as a boss, and I don't think Zach would, and I don't think any of the
No.
engineers would.
No.
That's the difference. He would go there and he'd be Max Verstappen, megastar, the guy Lando's got to beat, sort of thing, and that's the difference. When I say he's the boss, he's not the boss in that he at Red Bull in that he dictates things. It's just that there's this innate feeling of inside Isaac Hajar's side of the garage that Max is the boss. I mean, it's simple as that. There's no other way of describing it. It's just he's the man. Yeah, doesn't mean to say that Isaac can't go quicker than Max, and probably will on occasions, and has done already. But it just means that there's that feeling of the dynamic in the team is very well balanced. That's all I'm saying. If you've got a guy as good as Max, they've done a really good job of balancing that. And I dare say it would be the same if they had Lindblad in the other car. It'd be a similar thing. He's very good as well. But you'd never get that dynamic at McLaren. You would have had it, I think, between Lando and Daniel. I think it would have filtered down to that. And ultimately, Lando would have been the boss. And not the boss, it's probably the wrong way to put it, but it would have been a really harmonious, uncle and nephew type relationship, probably elder uncle. And, but you'd never get that at Ferrari. Never.
No.
And you don't have it at Mercedes at all.
No.
What's the relationship there? It's Kimi, who's mega, and then there's George, who's scratching his head, wondering what's going on.
Oh, poor George.
So it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah. Go on then, Peter. Final question from me. Hungarian Grand Prix. Who have you got?
I mean, it's impossible not to say Kimi because I can't see him being slower than George around there, and he's got the best car. So, and he drives the best car about as well as it can be driven. So how can it not? I mean, what you're really saying is, do you think Kimi will finish reliably the Hungarian Grand Prix? And my answer to that is, I don't know. I don't know enough about these regs, and probably be very hot in Budapest and different sort of circuit. I imagine it's not as hard on the power unit and all the other bits of the car. There seem to be lots of hydraulic issues these days as well, don't they, across the grid? I don't know whether these cars are harder on hydraulics than the older ones. So assuming reliability, it's got to be Kimi, Max in with a big chance, I would have thought, around there. But the interest will be Kimi versus George, and can Ferrari and McLaren take it to Red Bull? I'd see it that way around on this occasion.
Kimi's going to run away with this season. Peter, I am filled with a feeling of dread as far as the championship is concerned and the remaining races, that lead is only going to get bigger between Kimi and now Lewis Hamilton is in second place.
But why does that fill you with dread?
Because I want to see a competitive championship, Peter. I feel like the best, for me, the best F1 seasons are like a good film, right? That you don't know the ending until the end. And if Kimi Antonelli's winning the season, the championship by 80, 90 points, I feel like the F1 zeitgeist shrinks and people start to check out and go and scroll TikTok and whatever else because it's one less reason why to watch, because ultimately Kimi Antonelli is going to win the championship.
But you don't think they'll come out in their hundreds of millions just to watch the beauty of Kimi Antonelli and his artistry through the high-speed S's after turn one in Abu Dhabi if he's already won the championship? You don't think that they come out and watch him just drive the lap in the way they used to watch Tiger Woods just play around on his own, even if he was winning by 10 shots? You don't think the Formula One fans are that inclined?
I think a percentage will. And I mean, if you're talking about live audiences, the tickets have already been bought and sold, right? But if you're talking about viewing figures, I think we'll see the more if past this prologue, the more competitive the season, the more people that were just the mainstream guy. You know, when like 2021, how many texts from mainstream F1 fans did you get before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix? Oh, they robbed Lewis. Oh, Max is so brilliant. Mainstream guys and girls will watch that sort of stuff because it's blockbuster. Mainstream guys and girls will not watch this season. The more I think the interest drops off as a proportion of the extent to which Kimi Antonelli or anybody else for that matter dominates the season, the more the gap grows and the more it becomes a certainty, the more that people will
And
dial
do you
out,
think
I think.
Formula One as a business thinks the same way?
Um, I think, Peter, that there are linked points here. I think some of the stuff that you speak about earlier around the rules and the 60-40, I think that's because Liberty Media are desperately trying to get and keep the mainstream attention dollars. Um, to a fault potentially, but ultimately they run a business, and your favorite word, shareholders, if they don't maintain and sustain shareholder value, then they've got no hope of selling F1 as an entity in the next couple of years, which is what I think they will want to do.
But my point is that if having a close championship is so important to Formula One and its growth, why do they go and change the regulations the way they did into something that quite clearly was probably going to result in one team having a massive advantage, which most of us could have predicted and did predict before the start of the year anyway? Why did they do that? Why did they change something that was actually working quite well?
This is what they always do, isn't it, Peter? This is the whack-a-mole of managing stakeholder expectations. So I think that the answer to your question is
Stakeholder
twofold.
expectations. What does that mean, Cameron? Come on.
I
What
mean,
does
this
that
is
mean? Who
so
are
they
these
have
stakeholders of which you speak?
so the big material ones at the moment from an FOM perspective are the PUMs, right? The power unit manufacturers, and the new ones in particular in Cadillac F1 and Audi. So I think they decided that they were going to keep Audi and Cadillac happy, and that meant that they were going to need to do 50-50. And then secondly, as far as the 50-50 is concerned, you and I both know, Peter, that F1's always had this that they see themselves as having a burden, a debt almost to the automotive industry more broadly. Do you remember the flappy paddle gearbox? Do you remember like I want to say in the late 90s when F1 started doing flappy paddle, and then it drip fed down to like the 360 modern, and there's a massive deal made about it on Top Gear. Oh, this is an F1 gearbox and blah blah blah. I still think even as of the time of writing that F1 sees itself as the technological market lead, and that there should be things technological innovations that drip feed down from F1 into the automotive industry more broadly, hence hybridization and batteries and all this other gubbins, rightly or wrongly. But that's what I think they think.
Yeah, I'm sure they do think that, but they think that's more important than having a close championship with reliable cars and a fight going into Abu Dhabi between three drivers. It's totally out of proportion. Of course, we want a close championship. Of course, we want a 2021 every year. And yet they did everything possible
Change the
over the
rules.
last winter to make sure that didn't happen. So on that basis, well, on that basis, does anybody know what they're doing? Basically, you know,
No.
or conversely, because they're all so brilliant and it's what they do as a profession, they know more than we. Presumably, then we are going to get a massive fan following as of this last few races of the championship, even if Kimi's walking away with it, because everybody's fascinated by the technology to see how he drives the lap of Abu Dhabi with 50-50. It's going to be staggeringly interesting. Of course, I'm being cynical, you know. Bottom line, I mean, they don't even have graphics. It's just
Oh
ridiculous. You
no,
have no, I mean,
Peter.
if we had graphics on the grid to show how much battery storage all the teams had, that would be quite cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
or indeed going down the straight. And the minute you see George's battery, and it's a big graphic, you see the battery going down or whatever it is, it kind of explains what's going on.
Mm.
If they're going to go down that path of technology, whatever you want to call it, pacifying Audi and Cadillac, then why not do it properly with proper graphics?
I would like for them to do. I can't answer those questions, Peter. I
I
don't know
know
whether
any
it's.
more than I can answer them.
I don't know the idea.
Well,
I
here's
don't know
my question to you as
Mm.
we come round at the end of third base. Is Formula One, how much better off is Formula One now that we have Cadillac and Audi in it
I mean, it depends
on a
who you're
scale of 1
speaking
to
to,
10?
Peter. It depends who you're speaking to. I couldn't care less as a fan, Peter. I think I think PUMs, the more the merrier, but I don't care. I'd never sacrifice like naturally aspirated V8s at the altar of more PUMs. I couldn't care less. But for whatever reason, I think FOM and Stefano were quite. Um, I don't think they want to be at the behest of too few manufacturers. If let's say it's just Ferrari and it's Mercedes and it's Red Bull Ford, I think they think that that's not necessarily good. I mean,
Why? Because if those three are separated by 1 point with one race to go, you don't imagine there'll be a massive audience? Who cares about the middle of the grid? This
I'd
is the
agree with
problem
you.
with the cost cut thing. That, it was all driven by the midfield teams, by the Williams and the Force Indias. Oh, we've got to have budget cap in there. We've got to have cost caps because we've got no chance otherwise. And if you give us cost caps, we'll all be racing at the front. We'll all be much more competitive. Yeah, that really worked for Williams, didn't it? And it's just nonsense. The whole cost cap thing is a complete waste of time, in my opinion, because Formula One will always police itself in terms of what is affordable. Every race team will police itself as to what is affordable. And what we're missing now, because of the cost cap regulations, is the concept of Ferrari announcing a month ago that they're going to have a Mercedes copy car ready for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza for both drivers to come out of the pit lane in on Friday morning. You think that wouldn't be a great thing for Formula One to know that they've got this race-winning car coming out for Monza? We don't have that anymore because of cost cap, because of the budget cap. Same thing with Red Bull. You think Red Bull and McLaren and Ferrari wouldn't have caught Mercedes by now in the normal course of events if we didn't have budget caps? Of course they would have. We'd have great racing. That's another problem. And it's all of this. Where is all this money that Formula One's saving now? Where's it all going? It's going into buying the new motorhomes, the big luxurious motorhomes, which do nothing really for the global footprint. And it goes from bad to worse.
Yeah.
And we constantly get these emails from the teams and from Formula One about how Formula One's doing a great job saving the planet and the carbon footprint. But it's very simple. Do it in logical ways. Do it with the fuel. Do it with much more downgraded motorhomes and much less traffic on the roads and in the skies. That's how you do it. But you don't throttle back on the things the fans love, which is the ability of a Formula One team to build a completely new car in 6 months and have it out there racing, and or bring spare cars back into it as well. Spare cars to be used in practice, and if the race is stopped on the first lap, you can jump into it and the guy gets another go, and the fans benefit from that. All of that was stopped by Max Mosley for no reason, really. No reason other than that he wanted to stop it. And I think that those are all backward steps.
Mr. Windsor,
if you did a fan survey tomorrow and said, do you think we should bring back the use of spare cars? And if your favorite driver is eliminated on the first corner and they stop the race, do you think he should be allowed to get into a spare car and still start the race?
100%.
How many fans do you think would say, yeah, go for it?
The majority.
Well, more than the majority, 100%, I would say.
Yeah.
And the same for practice. When your favorite driver gets trapped out on the back of the circuit because a hydraulic failure with this complicated engine, do you think he should be allowed to get back to the pits and go out in a spare car?
1,000%.
Exactly.
It's not even a question, is it?
Exactly. Oh. And in the overall, if you look at the overall cost of Formula One, doing that is not prohibitive, given the amount of money that's wasted on other things, particularly the motorhome and paddock area.
Oh, Mr. Windsor, I could talk your ears off for another 60 minutes on the multitudinous foibles of F1 in 2026, but you've been super generous with your time.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, Cameron, as ever. And I think we're both a bit fired up, though, aren't we? Because this race was it wasn't a normal Belgian Grand Prix, and it was, yes, you can put all the plaudits on Kimi, correctly so, and the way he managed the power of the engine, the way he looked after his tires, everything else. But it was a race coloured by deployment and coloured by harvesting, and that's, you know, that's not the Belgian Grand Prix that I know and love. That's for sure.
It's a little bit opaque. Oh, hopefully they'll
More
get
than
better.
a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Mr. Windsor, you've been a legend as always. I appreciate you ad nauseum. If you call yourself an F1 fan and you're not already subscribed to the Peter Windsor YouTube channel, then what are you doing? Go and do that now. Shortly thereafter, get onto your favourite podcasting platform. The pick to click is the Short Corners podcast. Follow and 5 stars as per usual. If you're watching this, don't forget to like, hype, comment and subscribe. That's been Mr. Windsor. I've been Cameron CC as always. Between now and next time, may all your sectors be purple.